In the frozen wilderness of Wyoming where endless snow covers the mountains and silence feels heavier than sound, Cory Lambert lives a lonely and painful life. He works for the Fish and Wildlife Department as a predator hunter tracking dangerous animals across the Wind River Indian Reservation. Though he appears calm and experienced, Cory carries deep emotional scars from the death of his own teenage daughter Emily. The cold landscape around him mirrors the emptiness inside him, and every day feels like another quiet struggle to survive. One morning before sunrise, Cory prepares to travel to the reservation with his young son Casey. His ex-wife Wilma worries about him because a blizzard is approaching, but Cory insists he knows the roads well. Their relationship is distant yet respectful, shaped by grief they never fully overcame after losing Emily. Before leaving, Cory spends time teaching Casey how to handle horses properly. He explains that respect, patience, and calmness matter more than force. These moments reveal Cory as a caring father trying to pass wisdom to his son while hiding his own sadness. Cory arrives at the reservation to visit his former in-laws and investigate missing livestock. Tracks in the snow reveal that mountain lions are hunting cattle nearby. He studies the ground carefully, reading signs in the snow like a map. The harsh environment has taught him how to understand nature better than most people understand words. As he follows the predator's tracks across the frozen land, he suddenly notices something unusual in the distance. Half buried in the snow lies the frozen body of a young Native American girl. She is barefoot, wearing only thin clothes despite the deadly temperature. Cory immediately recognizes her as Natalie Hansen, a girl who used to spend time with his daughter Emily years earlier. The sight deeply disturbs him because Natalie's age and appearance remind him painfully of Emily. He contacts the tribal police, and soon Ben Shoyo, the reservation police chief, arrives at the scene. Ben knows Cory well and trusts his judgment. Together they examine the area carefully while waiting for the FBI. Cory notices tracks and signs that tell a tragic story. Natalie had been running through the snow for a long distance without shoes. Blood stains the snow where she collapsed. Cory explains that breathing freezing air while running can destroy the lungs, causing internal bleeding. Natalie likely died after her lungs filled with blood in the brutal cold. Hours later, FBI agent Jane Banner finally arrives from Las Vegas. She is young, inexperienced with wilderness conditions, and completely unprepared for the freezing weather. Wearing city clothes in the middle of a Wyoming blizzard, she quickly becomes uncomfortable and embarrassed. The locals immediately see she has no understanding of reservation life or survival in such conditions. Still, Jane is determined to do her job properly despite being out of place. Cory guides Jane to the body using snowmobiles. Along the way, the difference between them becomes obvious. Cory moves naturally through the wilderness while Jane struggles against the cold and isolation. Yet Jane refuses to quit. She listens carefully to Cory's explanations and begins relying on his instincts. The reservation itself feels forgotten by the outside world, isolated, poor, and neglected by authorities who rarely care about crimes involving Native Americans. At the crime scene, Jane studies the tracks and asks questions. Cory shows her where Natalie fell and explains how far she must have run. He says Natalie was strong and determined, suggesting she was desperately trying to escape someone or something terrifying. Jane realizes this is not simply a case of exposure to cold. There was violence involved before Natalie died. The investigation becomes complicated because of legal and jurisdiction issues on Native American land. The local coroner later confirms that Natalie was raped and physically assaulted before her death. However, he refuses to officially declare it a homicide because technically she died from pulmonary hemorrhage caused by the cold air destroying her lungs. Without a homicide ruling, the FBI cannot fully commit resources to the case. Jane becomes frustrated by the system, realizing how easily crimes on reservations are ignored or buried in bureaucracy. Despite lacking support, Jane chooses to continue investigating. Ben and Cory remain her only real allies. Cory especially becomes emotionally invested because Natalie reminds him so much of Emily. Her death reopens old wounds he has tried for years to suppress. Jane and Cory visit Natalie's parents. The family is devastated, especially her father, Martin Hansen. Their grief fills the small house like another kind of storm. Martin explains that Natalie had been living with a boyfriend, though he never met him personally. The parents trusted their daughter's choices even if they did not fully understand them. Now that trust feels like guilt. After Jane speaks with the family, Cory privately comforts Martin. This becomes one of the most emotional moments in the story. Cory talks about losing Emily and describes how grief never truly disappears. He explains that pain becomes part of life forever, but accepting it allows a person to keep memories alive instead of running from them. Cory's words come from personal suffering, not empty sympathy. He understands exactly what Martin is experiencing because he lives with the same pain every day. Martin reveals that his troubled son Chip has been associating with dangerous men, including the Little Feather brothers and a man named Frank Walker. Cory suspects these connections may lead them closer to the truth about Natalie's final days. Jane, Ben, and Cory drive to a remote trailer where Chip and the others are staying. The atmosphere is tense immediately. The men inside are hostile, aggressive, and clearly involved in criminal behavior. Jane attempts to question them, but the situation quickly escalates. One suspect reaches for a weapon, forcing Cory to react instantly. Gunfire erupts and chaos fills the small trailer. Cory's hunting instincts and sharp reflexes save everyone. He kills one armed suspect while Ben arrests the others. During the confrontation, they learn that Chip himself had no direct role in Natalie's death but knew she had been involved with a white construction worker connected to a nearby drilling site. Chip breaks down emotionally after hearing that his sister is dead, revealing genuine shock and grief. Outside the trailer, Cory notices snowmobile tracks leading away from the area. While Jane focuses on questioning suspects, Cory studies the land itself. He believes the snow holds answers that people are trying to hide. The tracks suggest movement between the trailer and a remote drilling camp nearby. Cory explains to Jane that investigations in wilderness areas are different from city crimes. Out here the land remembers everything. Every footprint, broken branch and tire mark tells a story. While others search for witnesses and paperwork, Cory searches for signs left behind in nature. As the storm grows stronger again, the investigation moves closer to uncovering the terrifying truth behind Natalie Hansen's death. Back in town, the suspects arrested earlier refuse to cooperate. Ben Shoyo explains that many troubled young men on the reservation no longer fear prison because their lives outside are already filled with poverty, drugs, and hopelessness. Jane becomes increasingly frustrated by how abandoned the reservation feels. Crime, addiction, and violence exist everywhere, yet almost nobody outside the community seems to care. Cory visits Chip Hansen, Natalie's brother, in jail. Chip is angry, bitter, and lost. Cory harshly confronts him about wasting his life dealing drugs and falling in with criminals. Chip accuses Cory of pretending to care even though he could not protect his own daughter Emily. The painful comment strikes deeply, but Cory controls his emotions. Eventually Chip reveals an important detail. Natalie's boyfriend was a white security guard named Matt Rayburn who worked at the drilling site. That night Cory visits his ex-wife Wilma. Their relationship still carries the pain of Emily's death. Wilma warns him that solving Natalie's murder will not heal his grief or answer the questions surrounding Emily's own death years earlier. Cory quietly accepts this truth, but he cannot stop searching for justice because helping others is the only thing keeping him alive emotionally. Later Jane visits Cory's home. Away from the investigation, the atmosphere becomes softer and more personal. Cory shows her a poem written by Emily before her death, revealing how talented and sensitive she was. Jane notices how deeply Emily's memory still controls his life. Cory finally tells the full story of what happened to his daughter. Years earlier, Cory and Wilma had left Emily home alone while they spent a rare evening together. During the night, friends came over, which eventually turned into a party filled with strangers. By morning, Emily had disappeared. Her body was later found miles away in the snow, badly damaged by wildlife, before authorities could properly investigate. No one ever truly discovered what happened to her. Cory has lived ever since with crushing guilt, believing he failed to protect her. The conversation creates a bond between Cory and Jane. She finally understands why he is so determined to solve Natalie's case. It is not only about justice for Natalie but also about confronting the pain he carries from Emily's death. The next morning they head to the drilling station with several tribal officers. The station sits isolated among the frozen mountains, surrounded by endless snow and silence. The workers there seem nervous the moment law enforcement arrives. Jane explains they are searching for Matt Rayburn and investigating Natalie Hansen's death. Some guards cooperate politely, but tension grows quickly when one worker notices armed officers moving around the perimeter. Suddenly paranoia explodes into violence. One guard believes the police are there to arrest them unfairly and he pulls a weapon. Within seconds both sides point guns at each other in a terrifying standoff. The freezing air becomes deadly silent as everyone waits for someone to make the first mistake. Jane desperately tries to calm both sides, reminding them she is FBI and has authority there. But fear and confusion have already gone too far. Gunfire erupts violently across the drilling site. Bullets tear through the snow-covered trailers as officers and guards shoot at one another. Ben Shoyo and several tribal policemen are killed almost instantly. Jane is wounded during the chaos but manages to survive by taking cover. Cory, who had been tracking outside the camp, hears the gunfire and rushes toward the site with his rifle. Using his hunting skills, Cory silently tracks the surviving shooters through the snow. He moves with deadly patience, eliminating armed men one by one from long distance. Unlike the others, Cory remains calm because the wilderness is his territory. The gunfight feels less like a police battle and more like a predator hunt. Eventually, the truth begins to emerge through flashbacks showing what really happened to Natalie. Natalie had been secretly living with Matt Rayburn at the drilling camp. Despite the rough environment, the two genuinely loved each other and dreamed of escaping their harsh lives together. One night while they were alone in Matt's trailer, several drunk co-workers entered and began harassing Natalie. One of them, Pete Mickens, made crude sexual comments and refused to leave. Matt defended Natalie, which triggered a violent fight. The other workers joined in, brutally beating Matt to death inside the trailer. Terrified and traumatized, Natalie escaped barefoot into the freezing night while the men chased her through the snow. She ran miles across the wilderness trying to survive, but the extreme cold destroyed her lungs, causing her to collapse and die alone in the mountains. The flashback reveals that Natalie's death was both murder and tragedy, a desperate attempt to escape evil that the wilderness itself ultimately finished. After the shootout, only one guilty man remains alive, Pete Mickens. Cory captures him alone in the snow far away from the drilling site. Pete is terrified, injured, and desperate to survive. Cory calmly questions him about Natalie and forces him to confess everything. Pete admits they raped Natalie and beat Matt to death. Cory then decides to deliver his own form of justice. He removes Pete's boots and leaves him barefoot in the freezing wilderness the same way Natalie was left. Cory tells him that if he can run to the highway he can survive. Pete cries and begs for mercy, but Cory simply repeats that Natalie had the same chance. Pete stumbles into the snow, screaming in panic as the cold begins destroying his body. Cory watches silently from a distance before finally shooting him dead after hearing his cries fade into the wind. Meanwhile, Jane survives her injuries and recovers at the hospital. Cory visits her there, bringing a small toy alligator as a gift. Their conversation reflects how much Jane has changed during the investigation. She arrived in Wyoming inexperienced and uncertain but survived through courage and determination. Cory tells her that luck means nothing in a place like Wind River. Survival depends only on strength and willpower. Finally, Cory visits Martin Hansen, Natalie's grieving father. Martin sits quietly with traditional death paint covering his face. The pain of losing Natalie remains unbearable, but there is also a small sense of peace knowing the truth has finally been uncovered. Cory tells him that none of the killers escaped justice. Martin thanks him silently, understanding what Cory has done. The film ends on a heartbreaking note explaining that while statistics exist for every other demographic in America, there are no accurate records for missing Native American women. Countless disappear without attention, justice, or answers. Natalie's story becomes a symbol of a larger tragedy, forgotten people living in forgotten places where grief and silence are buried beneath endless snow. If you enjoy watching this video, then subscribe to Angel Recaps for the latest movies explanation.